So thanks, Matt. Thanks everybody for coming out tonight. How's everybody doing, by the way? Good? All right, cool. My name is Wayne Warner, and I'm a senior front-end engineer at Bloomberg. And as part of I work in the consumer web team, and as part of that team, I work on most of Bloomberg's most high-profile sites, so Bloomberg.com and Business Week. But over the last year, I've been working on a series of new sites that's designed to reposition Bloomberg in the digital space. So our first project that we built was Bloomberg View. You can check that out on your phones at bloombergview.com. We built this site in about 3 months from scratch with an entirely new tech stack. And it's a really important site for us because it houses some of the most important minds that we have at the company, including some more famous people like Matt Levine, Megan McArdle, and even Mike Bloomberg writes on the site. So it's kind of a high-profile site, but it was received very well. Even though it came out pretty quickly, we did, I think, a really great job, and the reception from the community reflected that. So what's up here is a bunch of tweets that mostly focus on the design, but what we also heard a lot of was great feedback about how fast the site felt and how the experience with using it was really great. Not only on desktop devices, but also on mobile devices. And stealing a slide from one of my coworkers who's not in the audience today, this slide bears out that information. So if you look at this slide, it's showing the speed index. The green shows the index of the initial page load, and then the blue is the subsequent request. So in this slide, we can see Bloomberg View is on the far left. Bloomberg View's article page is the one on the right, the 700, and 900 is the home page. As you can see, our pages are comparable to Bing.com, USA Today, and not listed here, we're also comparable to Google.com, which is just like a text box. And if you go to our page, it loads a bunch of data, and then it renders a very large series of tiles. So, text box versus tiles, I think we came out pretty good. And as this graph also shows, we're about 5 times better than our original Bloomberg.com stack, so we had a huge improvement there. So we really didn't stop. We didn't really have time to rest. We went to our next site, which was Bloomberg Politics. And Bloomberg Politics, we actually had less time to build. Bloomberg View, we had 3 months, and Bloomberg Politics, we actually only had 2 months. We started in about August and finished in October 6th. And that site also went well. As you can see, Joe Biden was pretty happy about it. We had a little party. If you really want to see his excitement, go to bloombergpolitics.com and check out our 404 page. You'll see he's really, really into it. So now what we're working on is Bloomberg Business. So Bloomberg Business is going to be the new flagship, which we just announced, which will replace both Bloomberg.com and BusinessWeek.com and merge them into one site. So for this project, we have 3 months, and this was right after the 2 months for politics. So we're all a little bit overworked, but I think we're building some great products. So now I want to take us back to the original goal of all of these products, which was to reposition us in the space, and out of that came Brisket. So we started with a mandate from our bosses to basically build an application that serves HTML from the server, but runs as a single-page app on the client side. Our goal was to write the application one time. So why would we want to do that? Because everything was going pretty good. We had a Rails stack for most of our applications with JavaScript on the front end. But when we took a look at it, we had Rails on the back end and a combination of Backbone and jQuery soup on the front end. So what that left us with was a bunch of disjointed solutions. We had some of our code was in Rails, some of it was in CSS, and some of it was in jQuery or Backbone. You never could really know how to build a complete solution. And what we wanted to do also was make sure that even if we transitioned from our traditional apps to a client-side single-page app, that we maintain our SEO power because that's critical for our digital business. So that led us to isomorphic JavaScript, because for us that was the best solution at the time, and I think today that probably is still the best solution for us. So isomorphic JavaScript refers to any JavaScript that can be run in both environments, client and server. So for us, what we started with was trying to share templates between the client and the server. We wanted to see, could we render our templates in the client side and render the exact same one from the server. We found out pretty quickly that we can. It's pretty easy to do that. So then we started to ask, what else can we share? Can we share data models? Can we share routing? Can we share, at that point we were just like, why don't we share everything? So we started to look at our app again, and what we saw was that our traditional apps had about half of our code that was used to render content on the server side, came from Rails, and the other half was in the client, in the browser, for client side, changes as you're clicking from page to page, or if you're just updating some content. But what we really wanted to do was share everything. So we wanted really to share 100%, but obviously that's not realistic because the browser and the client have different responsibilities. A browser's job is to serve one person, whereas a server serves many people at the same time. Not only that, but clients and browsers have different tools at your disposal. So a browser has a window object, but a server doesn't, and a server has a process object, whereas a browser doesn't. So what we were trying to get to is about 80% code sharing for the most part, but this is a really hard problem, right? At the time when we were building this, not many people had done this at all. And we looked out into the world because we were like, we don't really want to do this if we can avoid it. So what we found was Render was the only framework that was out there at the time. And Render is a single isomorphic JavaScript application framework, which is built on top of Backbone. But when we actually looked at Render, we discovered that even though it solved our problems from a technical perspective, it didn't solve it from the perspective of how do we want to code. We saw that we didn't have a lot of freedom with the different coding styles we wanted to use, which is elucidated by this example. So if we look at this example of a typical render controller, you can see that the code style is very prescriptive. You have to specify for your route, in this case index, you're specifying I want a collection of users, and these are params, and it's also very callback heavy. Not only the actual code, but even where you put your code is defined by Render for you. So if you don't put your layout.hds, which they use handlebars, you can't use it. And we wanted to be more flexible, right? Because we have a lot of different teams and we have a lot of people with a lot of great ideas, and we want to foster those ideas. So now that led us to, can we get the same benefits of Render without having to write our code this way? But how do you do that, right? Because this is, again, like I said, this is a hard thing to do. So we kept thinking about it and working on it, and eventually we came up, through our desperation, we came out with Brisket. And Brisket is a JavaScript, isomorphic JavaScript application framework that's designed to allow you to focus on your application logic rather than where's my code running. It endeavors to give you maximum code freedom while still giving you all the tools you need to build out an application that it runs agnostic to its environment. So just like Render, Brisket is built on Backbone, so it shares a lot of the same utilities. So model, views, controllers. Just that instead of in Backbone where they only run in the browser, ours are environment agnostic. Excuse me. Brisket also offers a lot of other features. It gives you express routing, it gives you data bootstrapping, view reattaching, and a lot of these subsystems that are listed up here are extremely complex, and they probably each could be their own, 45-minute talk. So I probably will only cover them at a very high level. But feel free to reach out to me after this, or anyone from my team who's sitting over there on the left. They all know how to use it. So what I'm going to do now is give you guys a taste of Brisket, just kind of walk you through what your application will kind of look like. So what I'm going to start with is running I wrote a Brisket generator to just generate a sample app that we can start from. So I'm going to run it by doing yo Brisket and grunt. So the Yeoman generator that I made just writes all of the files that you need to run a sample Brisket app. Our particular example uses some of the tools that we use at work, which are Browserify, Grunt, things like that, but those are not necessarily requirements for running Brisket. As you can see, what happened there is the Yeoman generator wrote the files, and then it npm installed them, and then Browserify built our bundle. That's this Browserify line, and then the Grunt kicked off the application. But that particular example that it generates is a little too simple. So like any good cooking show, I have another example over here. So this is the one that is generated by the generator. And mine is over here. It looks exactly the same, but it's got a few more things that I want to take you guys through. So first of all, I just want to show you guys when you go to the first URL, you get HTML right away. You get the page right away. It's pretty fast, and you can click around. You get mac and cheese, green bean casserole, and you can get an error page. So just to demonstrate that what I've been saying is true, that you're getting a full page served to you from the server, I'm just going to show you the view source. So if you look in this view source for localhost 4000, we can see all the content that exists on our page is in the view source, which means we're getting it from the server. And then when we click from page to page, if we were to view source again, this source is actually for localhost 4000 size mac and cheese. So we're seeing the mac and cheese content is served through from the server. So now if we were to refresh, we're getting that from the server, and then we can click around, and as you can see on the right, Ajax calls it, new requests are firing on the client side. And in some cases, Ajax calls fire on the client side. As you can see here, the XHR on the right side. So what I'm going to show you guys is just how your code is going to look, starting from the beginning, which is the server that Brisket provides. So Brisket works with Express. It provides a Express engine. So I'm going to look through this Express file that I wrote, or that is generated for me. And the first thing I have is I have an include for my static content. And then I have a mounted Express engine for my API, which will just serve my Ajax calls. Then after that, I've got Brisket create server. And this is pretty much the entry point to any Brisket app. You can see that you just provided a little bit of configuration. You have to tell it where's your API, what's your client app require path, things like that. You can provide environment information. You can also give it some work to do when routes are handled, things like that. From there, I'm going to take you to our server app, which is the next entry point for the app. So you build your own server app and provide it to create server. So in our case, what we're doing is taking the environment config and spitting out variables from it. So when we start the app, we can see that on the server side, I'm printing my favorite town is Brisket town, of course. And my favorite server is a plate. But if we look at the client side, force habit. If we look at the client side, even though my favorite town is Brisket town, now the client app has started. So that happens because we have a different client app from the server app. So we use these two different apps to do custom instrumentation based on based on the environment. So that goes back into the 10% from the graph that I had shown earlier. That's where we kind of want that 10% to live. So then from there, the next place we go is to a router. Because in Backbone, pretty much everything starts with your router, and then your router pulls together your models and your views, and then you write to the page. For us, it's very similar. Although we do have a slightly modified router, its responsibility, instead of writing everything directly into the page, its responsibility is to return a Backbone view. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But in this example where we say we want to make the route sides mac and cheese, and that's this route here, to do that, all we do is we make a route handler that returns a new view, new instance of mac and cheese view. And inside that view, if we pull that up, we have a template which just spits out a string, image tag. So this view is using the default string template adapter, which is a string template adapter. So it just writes out whatever you want it to be directly in the template. So if I wanted the mac and cheese to say mac and cheese, it'll say mac and cheese. But the string template adapter is usually not what you want to do. You probably want some more complex stuff. So for a good example of that, we can go to the side view. So the side view, which is used to render green bean casserole, the side view is using a different template adapter. Brisket heavily leverages inheritance to do most of these kind of things, where we use a different technique or different strategy to do something. So in this case, we're using a different template adapter by overriding the template adapter property of base view. Base view is just inherited from Brisket view. I lost it. So if we go to this template, if we go to that template adapter rather, we can look at how it's working. So it basically says each template adapter just implements template to HTML, which takes the template ID, the data, and the partials that we want to render. In this case, all this one is doing is taking a list of compiled templates that we generate through our grunt task, and then just returning the string that's rendered by that template. So if we take a look at the actual template in this templates directory, we can see that it's pretty simple. It's just an h1 tag, and if there's a URL, we render an image tag. So in this case, we're using Hogan, but we could just as easily use handlebars, mustache, whatever you want to do. You just have to implement your own template adapter. And hopefully we'll try to build up a nice little community of different template adapters you can just plug and play really quickly. So in this case, if we go back to our sides router, so the sides were eat greens, sides vegetables type. So in this case, we want green bean casserole. So that's actually getting passed to this model side, which is just like any other Backbone model. We have a side, we pass in a type. If we look at that side model, the ID attribute is type. So we're using all the same facility that Backbone provides. The URL root is API side, and then when we're on the server side, we're making the necessary network calls to get the data, so that when we view the source, all the contents in the page, and then as we click around on the site, the same network call happens in the browser. So it's pretty much seamless as far as knowing where your code is running. It works everywhere. So then what we do is, Brisket is heavily promise-based, so what we do then is fetch the data, and then we return a promise of a view. So in the earlier example of eat mac and cheese, we just returned an instance of a view. Now in this second example, what we're doing is returning a promise of a view. So Brisket handles either or seamlessly. You don't have to really think about it too much. And it makes it pretty much easy to just follow the application logic of what's going on. So now I just want to show some other more complex things that Brisket does to kind of give you facilities to do the things you need to do fairly easily. So we talked about SEO. We really need that. So Brisket provides conveniences to add your title and add your meta tags. So right now, if we look at my home page, it says your first Brisket site, but that's actually just the default title that our application uses because we're using a layout. Our default layout just sets the default title, so all the pages say that right now. But if we want to say something custom, all we have to do is uncomment this line. And now my title is updated to a nice home page. And what's also cool is even if I'm clicking around, the title is updating. I go back, now it's a nice home page. Meta tags is very similar, although we're working on a PR right now where the meta tags will update from page to page. But for now, you do get the meta tags in the source from the server. So if you look in here, we'll see, well, what did I ask for? I asked for a description, a nice description about the home page. So if we look at what's here, a nice description about the home page. So in that way, we're getting all the SEO power that we wanted with very little effort and not thinking about it too much. But then there are some more complex things you need to do. For example, we have use cases like when you hit the initial page load, I don't want the browser to scroll to the top. I want it to be the natural position where the user left it from the last time they were here. So a good example of that is in our sides router. So Brisket provides a normalized request object that you can use. Well, you don't have to worry about where you're using it, obviously, but it works on the client and the server with consistent values that are always the same, regardless of environment. So in this case, we're saying if request is first request, I want to render a 500 for no reason, like just to test it. You wouldn't actually do this. So by the way, it's restarting because we're using current concurrent. But if I were to now go to the home page, nothing happens. Well, that's how demos go. Huh? Oh, was it? There you go. Still didn't work. Oh, there it goes. So that actually worked completely because what I told it was if I'm the first request, throw the error. So when I click, it didn't because it's not the first request. Now when I refresh, it is the first request, it throws the error. So it provides conveniences like that. And we're continuing to expand on those as we develop these use cases as well. Like I said, we're heavy consumers of Brisket, so we're having to build these as we go along. And I think that's it for what I wanted to show you guys in the code and see how that works. But now I want to take you guys into how does a single request work. So what we saw there was we went to a page and then the page was there, and then as we clicked around, it became a single page app. So the next couple of slides are going to illustrate how that works. So what happens is I make that first request in the browser, and then that request is sent to Express. Express then forwards that request on to our backbone rendering engine, which is basically your application. Your application's job is to take as input a request from anywhere and then return a single backbone view, which goes back to what I was saying about returning a view from the routers. That's its job, is to answer the question of the request, what is my view for that request? The view is then sent to the server renderer, whose job is to mux together the layout for that request and the view for that request, and then send that back to the browser as HTML. Once it sends that browser back as HTML, it appears on your browser. But the request is not really over because your view that you send back still has more work to do. So now that we're into the page, your same backbone rendering engine reanimates that HTML page. All of the views that were built on the server are now alive again and can accept user interaction and deal with anything anyone has to do. And then once you go and click for a second request, because your application has been bundled and now lives in the browser, it now intercepts your request rather than it going back to Express. So again, the rendering engine that existed on the server has the exact same job, is to take in a request and return it back on view. This time when it returns the view, it goes to the client renderer. And the client renderer's job now is just to update the content in the layout that's in the page. And then you have your second request and all your subsequent requests. And your code hasn't changed. Your code is just that black box that's always the same, which for us has been pretty good. So this is to me, this is a pretty cool thing, but of course, like anything, it has its stumbling blocks and its fair share of issues. So far what we found is that the biggest stumbling block is that it's not done. So, if we want to do some new problem, it doesn't exist, or there's no solution for it yet in Brisket. There's just no solution. You have to either write it or make a workaround and then push it back up to Brisket. So that's kind of been one of our biggest problems. And then from there, there's no Stack Overflow for this because we wrote it. Because there's really no one to help us except us. Which is good and bad because it helps us to learn a lot, but sometimes it slows us down. The next problem is that the framework is designed to be a very low-level framework. It's designed to be more like a seed framework that you could build something bigger on. It's designed to build out the guts of what you need to make this stuff work. So with that being said, it's not opinionated, so you have to form your own opinions, which means if you have a lot of time, that's great. But if you don't, like us, we have 2-month deadlines, 3-month deadlines. That's a lot to think about extra on top of trying to solve some pretty hard problems. Some of the other problems that we had have been trying to let go of the idea of knowing where my code runs. So the idea of knowing that this code happens on the client versus this code happens on the server. Letting that go is a very difficult step because most of us have either coded in one environment or the other, or even when we've done both, we kind of hang out on one side for a while and then we go to the other side. With us, we just write our code once and don't even think about it. But then the downside of that is we sometimes forget that, when we do remember that actually, we sometimes forget that our code does run in both environments. So things like some of the patterns that we've used in the past, for example, if you work mainly in browsers, you tend to write a lot of singletons. You might forget to clean up memory with event handlers, or just you hold on to variables. That doesn't matter as much in the browser, but on the server, you definitely will create a memory leak that actually will take down your entire site, which we've done a couple times. So we've had those kind of stumbling blocks. And then lastly, we're building this new framework in an environment that wasn't really ready for it. For example, a lot of the tools we want to take advantage of, like jQuery plugins and things like that, haven't been designed with this idea in mind. They're designed for browsers, right? So they have code in there that say like window dot something, and that immediately fails on the server. So our challenge has been to integrate those kind of plugins and kind of stand on the shoulders of giants, even though the giants didn't know about this kind of thing. So with that being said, we still had a ton of wins though. I think from a technical perspective, we achieved all the goals that we set out to accomplish. We had, our goal, like I said, was to build an application that serves HTML from the server, but is a single page app on the client side. And we achieved that. And then also we achieved the code freedom that we wanted. We use very different code techniques. We have many debates about what style to use. and that's a really good thing from an organizational growth perspective. We also get to write our code once, which means that we save a lot of time writing our code, but also because we only have one language to learn, there's less things to learn, which means you'll be faster at getting really good at it. You know, you don't have to learn array, prototype, slice one time, as opposed to slice in JavaScript, slice in Ruby, things like that. Also, I think that from an organizational perspective, we've also achieved all of those goals. So our big goal from a money's perspective was SEO, and we've knocked that out. We're not only are we doing the standard meta tags that you see in the top of pages, we also do micro format, schema org markup, which also improves our SEO standing. So we're doing a really great job there. And then also from a flexibility standpoint, because our code can run in either environment, we could, if we wanted to, for some reason, just stop doing this isomorphic thing. We could run a traditional application tomorrow if we really needed to, or if we found that our server side, if our memory leak on the server was too serious, we could just cut that off if we really, really wanted to. And that leaves the organization a lot more flexible to grow and do the things that it needs to do. Overall, I think it's been a really good experience, but you guys should definitely reach out to the other people on my team and ask them how they feel about it. I'm hoping that they say it's amazing. So yeah, please give it a try. Please fork Brisket. We're really excited to not only have get feedback on what we've built, but we're really truly interested in getting support from the community and getting feedback and help on some of these really hard problems that we have to solve. Also, our team, our consumer web team, really wants to be a member of the open source community, and we want to share in all the struggles and try to help everyone solve their problems and help us solve our problems. It's also available on NPM if you use NPM install Brisket. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Mr. Lucia.
So if it's a single page app, what happens if I disable JavaScript in my browser?
That is a very good question. I can show you. It might be. So if I disable JavaScript, I say I head to my home page. So what happens here is that the logo Brisket didn't flash because that code that was in there was only designed to run once you reach the DOM. So if we look at the home view, actually this is in the layout. So in the layout, we can see that on DOM, so once the view reaches the DOM, it's being told to fade in and out the layout, the logo, but without JavaScript it doesn't do that. However, I can still read all the content that I came to read. So if this were an article, I can still read the article, even though there's no JavaScript, which is really powerful for us because for Bloomberg.com we have millions of users. So some may have JavaScript on, off. Some may have browsers with push state, without push state. Brisket seamlessly handles all of that by degrading to, when I click this link, I just become a standard server-side application.
Migration. If you had a project that involved Marionette backbone on the front end, how would you migrate it back to your phone?
So the question was, how does migration work? If you had a product that was all backbone Marionette, how would you migrate it over? So right now, unfortunately, we don't support Marionette as far as we can't Brisketify another framework yet. That is on the roadmap. That's something we want to do because at least me, I personally like Marionette. Some of the other great frameworks and great work that people have done, I think should be able to work with this pretty easily. So that's just something that, if you feel interested, definitely help us out with that one because we got a ticket for it on.
I put that in there.
When you make a second page code, what does the data look like? The JSON object that gets passed around.
So what do you mean?
So when we do an AJAX call to the server, as a single page app, what does the AJAX request look like? The response to it.
Okay, so the question is, as a single page app, what does the data look like as you click from page to page? So let me turn JavaScript back on after that blank question. So if we look at the console, pretty much on every page, so let's start with the home page. If you look at the home page that doesn't have an AJAX call, there's no mention of any calls here. If we go to a page that has AJAX, when we first get to the page, on the server side, it makes the appropriate request, and then when you get to the browser, it mocks out that call. So then when I click around, find something with AJAX, polenta, it makes a normal AJAX call, and the response that's in there should be in network tab. So in this case, it's just a standard plain object, but you have all the same facilities as any backbone model. So if for example, I could change how that data looks right now. So if I change it to be change that to be like a dummy object that's in the middle, but I want to parse out the actual data that I want. So now when I go to side, if I go to side, I can just add a parse function, which if I remember correctly works like this. Data.dummy. So now for this one, I've got nothing because that one's not using the correct data format. But if I click on polenta, it is the correct data format that my code expects. When I go in here to see it, you can see it's the data format that's there. So it's like any other backbone app. It's RESTful and RESTful with JSON, but also like any other backbone app. If you have a different backend, you could override the sync method to fetch JSON-P. If you really wanted to, you could fetch what's that? I can't even think of XML. I haven't thought about XML in so long. If you really wanted to do that, you could do that.
And then to make say, if the content was like Mongo or something, you override the fetch.
If the content was like Mongo?
Where was it Mongo? So you created this query to get the content. Would you override the fetch?
Yeah, you can override. So overriding sync is similar to overriding fetch, just at a lower level.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could override your fetch. I think we're doing that for something on the client side now.
So you said it has a dependency on backbone, right? Backbone has a dependency on jQuery underscore bootstrapper.
Right.
So the question is this is just kind of a newbie question. Is the same instance that's running on the client run on the server? Is it the exact same stack on both sides?
So the question is, Brisket is running on Backbone, which depends on underscore jQuery. So are we running the exact same stack on the client and the server? Sort of. So on the server side, jQuery works a little bit differently. We actually have to provide it a window from version 1.8 and up. we have to provide it a document. So we actually have a wrapper for a server-side jQuery and a client-side jQuery, which is the normal jQuery. Everything else is the exact same code. So yes.
Have you guys heard of isomorphic?
We have. Actually, my boss the other day sent me easel and was like, what about that? And I was like, I guess. There's a lot of competition in the space. So as I mentioned, when we started this, there was only render. But now, if you go to something like isomorphic.net, there's about 14, 15 different projects in the space. I think each one comes with a different approach. From what I saw of Easel, it's not as low level as this. It's a little bit past that, similar to Lazo.js, some of the other ones. There's actually a lot of them. Talnus, but they all come with a different approach. So it's kind of at this point, if they're all providing what you need, which is HTML from the server, single page app on the client, you kind of now have to go for what's working the fastest, what meets my use cases, and also what do I want to code in. So for us, we went with this because we could define what we wanted to code in, or how we wanted to code.
Right now, are the template adapters inside of Brisket, or are they like separate repos that are like what?
So the question was, are the template adapters built into Brisket, or are they separate repos? So Brisket right now only ships with the string adapter, just because you have to have something for testing. Brisket is heavily tested, by the way. I think it's like 300 some odd tests, but we have to test with something. So we have a string adapter that we ship with, just really as a convenience to get started. But you can build out your own template adapter pretty easily. So the one that I showed a little bit earlier looks like this. If I wanted to write, let's say a mustache template, because I have mustache in my project, it would be as simple as mustache, something along those lines. I can't remember how mustache works, but it's pretty simple. Mustache render, data partials.
I was just going to mention you guys should look into using peer dependencies to sort of plug into that. I can show you how to do it.
Definitely.
Basically, just like an npm install Brisket dash handlebars would automatically make that available. You can make it so it would be like a property you can dot off of Brisket to get to it, so like that.
Right. So you were saying that we should investigate peer dependencies, and we started to look into that. And I guess that's one of the stumbling blocks I forgot is what's the right package management solution? Node, Power. We're still working on the right solution to ship like an entire component. Peer dependencies is a great step in that direction, I think. Start making plugins and things like that.